Flipper are a punk band from San Francisco. They were formed in 1979 and are still going with two of the members still in place from their original lineup. They've been fairly stable in lineup except for bassists. They have, over that period of time, which is quite a long period of time, released 4 studio albums and 5 live albums. Hi, my name's Dan, and this is a review of album Generic Flipper by Flipper. It's their first album, and it's my first encounter with them, so I've not heard this before. As I always do, or almost always, I listened twice, and between the 2 listens, I did a read up on them. So I get a blind listen and then an informed listen. And I also need to say that this album is referred to at times as album generic, as generic, or as generic flipper. So I'm not quite sure what I would refer to it as. Maybe generic flipper seems to make sense to me, given the. Maybe that's just because that's what's written in the Acclaimed music, but it's what's written on the cover as well. Anyway, not important. Let's talk about the music. So apparently this was at a time when punk generally was speeding up and they slowed down, which made them different. Critics have waxed quite eloquent about this album, which is, I find, a little bit ironic because in itself it is not particularly eloquent. Maybe they hit a sweet spot with some people, but if you've seen the score, you realise I didn't like this album. Okay, so I have one really big problem with this album, and have had with other things that have similarities to this. So for me, the problem is I can't help thinking that there are 1,000 bands around the world right now practicing in garages who sound just like this. So why is this one lauded? And why has this one made it onto this list of 3,000 greatest albums of all time? Is it because those bands don't get to the stage of recording until they've got better, or they express themselves better? And so it's actually quite rare to have something that sounds this unsophisticated in its music. I think also it goes along with the fact that I can't help but being drawn to uh, things where there is quality, where there's production quality, where there's playing quality, where there's writing quality, where there's all sorts of things that I see as quality in here. And when the USP of it is lack of quality, that tends to turn me off. So that is definitely the case here. So seriously, I want to know what's special about this album that brings it onto this list, because I really don't get it. Okay. So I'm going to be mean to start off with, and then I'm going to do a bit less mean stuff about it. So the really mean stuff here is, excuse me, itchy nose, is that, so it's very raw, it's very lo-fi, very lo-fi. We've got guitar, bass, and drums. There is some basic ability in playing the chord sequences. They are not well in time. They're further out of time than I would say. This is quite loose. I'd say this is very loose and quite undisciplined. It's often out of tune, and sometimes they're even playing in different keys to each other. Now the drums can't play in the same key as everybody else, but the bass and the guitar, you'd think getting them in the same key would be a good idea. I'm not sure they're necessarily, well, they're either rejecting the idea of key at times, or I'm not sure they actually understand key here. This is emphasized by the singing slash shouting, which is probably in some ways better when it's shouting than singing, because when it's more kind of sing shouting, is almost always in a completely different key and bears no relation to the music, apart from being kind of in time with it in terms of speed. The guitar playing is particularly chaotic, distorted, and discordant. So this is what gets this labelled as noise here. So some will like that. There's a kind of rawness and thrashiness to that gives you a feeling of anarchy. In fact, the whole thing has this big feeling of anarchy to it. So that's all the stuff that I really dislike, and uh, as I'll reiterate later, is almost certainly going to be the things that the people who love it these are the things that they like about it. I've discovered that when I dislike stuff, there are people who like exactly the things I dislike. Um, but let's be a bit more charitable. So there's quite a lot of repetition going on here. It's not like free jazz that is completely disconnected from each other. They get patterns and they go round and round these patterns, often very much the same pattern all the way through a track. Um, and why is that being more charitable? Because that repetition actually gives it a structure and a feeling to it. It actually feels a bit space rock at times. Space rock and funk? Yeah, maybe. Yeah, those two can go together. I could say I can see elements potentially of Hawkwind in here. Yeah. And our Hawkwind at times were quite thrashy, but they certainly did space rock. It's almost at times krautrocky in this sense, almost, but not quite. Um, the songwriting is very minimal, and they've made a feature of not having many words for most of the songs. Yeah, apparently the last track, Sex Bomb, has something like 7 words in it. Occasionally, it has a little bit of a spark or a shock in it, and the best one for me was the Way of the World. So I'm going to read out some lyrics now. There are kisses undelivered, sighs and moans unuttered. That's the way of the world. There are hearts no longer beating, and there are entrails spilled on the floor. That's the way of the world. And you've gone from kisses to entrails, which in some ways I can see how this is doing something interesting here. I'm really hoping that entrails spilled on the floor is not really the way of the world, and it's not my experience of the world. I'm not sure I've ever come across that, thankfully. The last track, Sex Bomb, which I mentioned before, musically, it's not less chaotic, but it's better in some ways for me because it has a pair of saxes playing. Now, the sax playing also gets at times quite chaotic, but the combination gives it a fuller, sheer full-on sound of noise that actually, in some ways, for me, is better as it's fuller. It just gives it a more of a kind of feel to it, if you like. So, as I said before, everything I dislike about this album will be reasons why other people love it. Some people, critics have said it's unpretentious. I'm going to claim that it's not unpretentious because I think it's pretentious in its unpretentiousness. So I think that it's not actually played by people who are this bad at playing. I think that they're doing this deliberately, and therefore that is pretension because it's designed to provoke the kind of reaction that I've had to it. And that reaction is no. So that's what I think of this album. I'd love to know what you think. So please do let me know, especially if you're one of these people I'm referring to who love it. I'd love to know if there are things that I've missed, or do you agree that it's the things that you love are exactly the things that I dislike? Or, are there other qualities here that I've missed? And please do contribute to the polite and respectful discussion that we have on this channel. I'd love to hear from you. And that's it from me for now.